So welcome back to another Wheel of Time video. I think that one of the reasons that the Wheel of Time fandom is so enduring is because of how endlessly rereadable this series is. I mean, for me, a huge part of the reread is that I start to feel like I miss these people and this world, which is kind of crazy because they're not real. But on a less crazy level, there's so much detail, so much foreshadowing, clues and symbolism. There's too much for most people to pick up the first time or even like the fifth time in rereading. Jordan was constantly placing these proverbial Chekov's guns all over the place, and they would fire much, much later on. But not all of them did. And so that's what I want to talk about in this video. But of course that means spoilers. And yeah, in this case, the spoilers go all the way to the end of the book series. So if you haven't finished the entire Wheel of Time series, I do not recommend watching this video. But if you have, then let's get into it.
Let's be nerdy, babe. Let's be nerdy, let's be nerdy. Let's be nerdy, babe. Let's be nerdy, babe. Let's be nerdy, let's be nerdy, babe.
Jordan was constantly and continually laying the foundation for things that would pay off so much later on. And it was so satisfying when it did. Like, even for me, even if I predicted it, like, I'm of the opinion that I would rather something make sense, even if it means that I am able to predict it, rather than have something come out of nowhere to surprise me. Because those kind of surprises, they don't satisfy me. They feel cheap, if anything. But that doesn't mean that Jordan wasn't able to surprise me. I fully, personally had like an oh shit moment when Oliver blew the horn. It had never occurred to me that Matt wasn't tied to the horn. All the foundation was there. Chekov's gun, as I said, had been lying there on the mantle the entire time. I had seen it. And yet when it fired, I was caught off guard in the most satisfying way. Okay, that particular Chekov's gun of, like, Matt having died, potentially more than once, is not the only one. There are so many of these guns lying around the set of the Wheel of Time, so to speak. And, not all of them got fired for whatever reason. Like, I think that, I know that I can sometimes forget on a reread that this story was written over literally decades. RJ could have changed his mind about things or realized as he went on that a specific plot point that he was setting up wasn't going to work. But that the setups are still there. And so, yeah, the first unfired gun, I guess that's the metaphor I'm going with here, is one that we actually have notes on. Like, we know what the bullet was supposed to be. I am so stuck with this metaphor. Or the target. I don't know. I'm talking about Taimandred. We know from RJ's notes that Mazrim Taim was intended to be Taimandred in disguise. And for whatever reason, Robert Jordan changed his mind. Now, obviously, it's Jordan's story. He can change his mind if he wants to. Again, story is written over a period of decades, and I know I change my mind about stuff all the time. It's entirely legitimate and okay for an author to change their mind about where they want a plot point to go. I'm not making a judgment about him or the writing when it comes to changing his mind, but that what it does mean is that there is this setup for a plot line that doesn't happen. Now, a lot of it I can work my head around, of it being, okay, Time was working with Taimandred maybe, but there is this one line where Time is talking about the Aiel, and he calls them the so-called Aiel. And I can find no way to make that work in my head with the canon of the story as it is. It's just, it is an unfired gun. Like, if I wasn't the hardcore Wheel of Time fan that I am, and I had found out through talking with and reading about people who had read RJ's notes about what his original plan was, this line would make no sense. And as it is, for me, because I know, it's a curiosity in the story. So I'll move on from one that now for me is just like, oh, that's a relic, to one that does actually stand out to me as something that doesn't ever pay off in the books. However, it is still a vague one, or it's a questionable one, because I am actually struggling. I was struggling as I was writing my notes to remember if my knowledge about this is based on something that is actually in the books, or if it comes from supplementary materials, or again, because of the fact that I'm a huge Wheel of Time nerd, if it comes only from Robert Jordan. Like, okay, what I'm talking about is dexterity versus strength. In the Wheel of Time canon, male channelers are, on average, on the whole, your stronger male channelers are stronger than your female channelers. Men just have more strength than women. But female channelers are supposed to be more dexterous. Which, and again, I'm just going to quote from Robert Jordan here. Like, this is a quote from Robert Jordan in an interview. He says, in terms of channeling of raw amounts of the one power, men can handle more than women. However, women are much more dexterous in their ability to use the one power, so for all intents and purposes, they are equal in their abilities to do and create weaves, and are mostly equal to each other. What makes this an unfired gun for me is that we never actually see this come into play in the books. In the books, strength in the power always wins out. The few times I can think of that we see a female channeler actually able to beat a male channeler, it is a Forsaken who has hundreds of years of practice and study with the one power versus Rand, who is at that time completely untrained. So that doesn't show me dexterity versus strength at all. It shows me one person who is an absolute expert with the weapon going up against somebody who is fumbling with how to even hold it. So I don't know if this qualifies officially as an unfired Chekov's gun, this term that I'm apparently making up, especially because I'm not even sure if this information is given to us in the text of the books, but it feels like it is to me. Strength in the power always wins. Except, okay, as I was writing my notes, I thought of an exception, and the exception was Androl, which is frustrating to me because Androl's a man. And like, okay, it's not like I don't want men to be dexterous and I don't want women to be strong. Obviously, I kind of wish that this hadn't been part of the canon at all. But like, if you say that the advantage women have is dexterity, but then the one time you show us dexterity winning out over strength is with a male channeler, it's weird. So, okay, I'm going to move on from that one to the next, in my mind, unfired gun. I don't like this metaphor that I keep using, but it's the one that works. And that is Cadsuane. Okay, and this is another one I kind of have to qualify because I actually think that I know what the target of the Cadsuane gun was. God, I hate this metaphor. But I think I know what her setup led to. I just find the payoff wasn't worth the setup to me. Like, okay, she comes in and she spends a lot of her time intentionally antagonizing Rand, crossing his boundaries in a way that drives me insane when I read it. But I can tell you that the first time, or well, the first several times I read her parts of the story, before the books were finished, I tolerated her in my mind because of the setup, the Chekov's gun, of Min's viewing that Cadsuane had something to teach Rand. And so I waited, and I waited for something to make her treatment of Rand worth it. And it never came. I mean, she did sort of teach him something, like if I squint, I can see it, but it never felt worth it to me. Like, okay, using this Chekov's gun metaphor that I am completely stuck in. You've got the gun there on the set, and you pick it up, and then you flip it over, and you walk over to someone, and you boop them on the nose with it. That's kind of what the culmination of Cadsuane's plotline feels like to me. It's like, really? That's what you were going to do with that? Huh? Did I mention I'm not a Cadsuane fan? And, like, if and when she's ever played by Shohreh Aghdashloo, I do not know how I'm gonna handle it. Okay, so, moving on to the next one on my list. Elayne's accidental weapon. So, okay, right after they use the Bowl of the Winds, Elayne does what she does. She makes an incredibly impulsive and rash decision that puts everyone around her at risk. But because she's not Gowan, it actually works. She tries to unravel a weave, and she fails at it. But in doing so, she creates an explosion that somehow leaves an area of land somewhat unsafe for channeling, I think, for the duration of the books. I'd have to double check, but I'm pretty sure it is. Now, this, as with, I should say, everything in this video, and like all of my videos actually, is subjective because, okay, this does actually have a consequence in the books. And the consequence is actually kind of cool because the Seanchan don't know that it was an accident. And they are scared that the Aes Sedai have access somehow to a one-power weapon that they don't know about or understand. And it does inform their decisions. Like, I think without this sort of perceived threat looming over them, they might have attacked the Aes Sedai more forcefully sooner than they did. But again, subjectively for me, this feels like an unrealized setup because it's never really explored. She created or possibly destroyed something with the one power, and we don't really know what it was. We don't know if it can be repeated or if it should be repeated, if what she did was permanent. And it's one of those things that when I'm reading, I get distracted by it, by when it comes up, because it feels like something that was going to be explored or explained, and then it just wasn't. But that's just my subjective experience, so, take this and this entire video and my entire channel with a grain of salt. Okay, editing, let's be jumping in, because while I was editing this video, I thought of another one. And this is another one that it's sort of a qualified one, where it's a Chekov's gun, I hate this metaphor, but whatever, that has been lying there on the mantle, and I know when it got fired. But it getting fired, like, the way it got fired did not seem worthy of having had it so prominently displayed on the mantle for so long. And that is Berelain. The plotline of Berelain, the Chekov's gun here is Min's viewing of a hawk and a falcon on Perrin's shoulder, and so the feeling you get is, oh, this is going to be significant, this is going to be important, and then when it happens, it's just dumb. Like, it's just dumb. It's a plotline, in my opinion, that makes every single person involved. It makes Perrin look bad. It makes Fael look bad. It makes Berelain look bad. Everybody looks stupid, and it brings them all down as characters. Berelain looks like an idiot because she's going after a man who very, very clearly does not want her, and she's doing it for really, really petty reasons. And I know, every time I bring this up, every time I say this, there are people who are like, no, it was political. She needed to get close to the dragon. First of all, by the time this plotline really comes to fruition, she doesn't need this. She's already in good with Rand. Secondly, if she really needs to get good, like close to the dragon, Mat is there, and I know Mat's too much like her. That's a dumb excuse. If you really, really have the need to get close to the dragon, go for the sure thing. And Mat and Berelain would have been an excellent couple. It would have been a lovely power couple. I would have loved them as a pair. But no, she goes after Perrin, and people forget this. She actually says in the books, like out of her own mouth, to Fael, I'm going to take him because you said I couldn't. Like, it's incredibly, incredibly petty. And then Perrin looks incredibly dumb because why can't he use his words out of his mouth to say to Berelain, no, I don't want you that way. I'm in love with my wife. Back off. And why can't he also use his words to say to his wife, who he knows is jealous because he can smell it on her, hey, wife, I can smell that you're jealous. I don't want Berelain that way. I don't know why she keeps doing this. Help me out. Am I giving her signals? Can you please help me? You know more about international cultures than me. Like, use your words. Why aren't you using your words? Why is this happening? And then Fael. Fael becomes one of the most hated characters in all of the fandom because of how jealous she is, when there is actually somebody out there trying to steal her husband. And it's like the fandom is gaslighting this fictional character. Like, why are you so jealous? Somebody's literally trying to steal her husband. And yet she acts unreasonable, and it does make her look petty and stupid because she knows that Perrin isn't going to cheat on her, but she's constantly being poked by. I hate this plot line. The gun, the Chekov's gun, goes off, and it fizzles out into nothing, and it fizzles out into something that makes three characters that should be awesome look worse. So from that, I will move on to my final unfired gun. Why do I keep using this metaphor? But okay, this is the one that actually inspired this video. On my latest reread, something jumped out at me that, like, I know I've read it before. I've read this series many, many times, but for some reason, it just didn't stand out. But now that I've noticed it, I cannot stop thinking about it. And that is, it's Nynaeve. Of course, it's Nynaeve related. This is me, after all. But I'm talking about Nynaeve's stigmata. Did you notice that Nynaeve gets stigmata in the books? Did you notice this? Because I've read these books literally dozens of times, especially the earlier books, because I reread them as the series was being written. Like, especially me, I grew up incredibly religious. How did I not notice, I should say, that my favorite character gets stigmata in book 2? Okay, if you don't know what I'm talking about, it's from her accepted test. She comes out of the accepted test, and I'm just going to quote it straight from the books. This is from the Great Hunt. Nynaeve's hand quivered with a sudden pain she had not felt before. Driven through the palm of each hand, right in the center, was a long black thorn. Shiriam drew them out carefully. Nynaeve felt the cool healing of the Aes Sedai's touch. When each thorn came free, it left only a small scar on the front and back of the hand. Shiriam says that there shouldn't be any scarring right after this, but there is. So apparently, from her accepted test onward, Nynaeve is walking around with scars in the center of both of her hands. And okay, this book was written for a primarily Western audience. Putting scars in the center of her hands, of both of her hands, to a Western audience that is just in general steeped in Christian imagery, this has significance. Giving a character these kinds of markings, it has implications. This is very much Jesus imagery given to Nynaeve, not Rand. And ever since I noticed it, I find myself wondering what was the intention with that? Like, I can't imagine that it wasn't intentional. RJ knew how those scars would be interpreted by his primarily Western audience. So now, to me, it feels like an unfulfilled setup. Piercing the palms of her hands and leaving a scar, it's so deliberate that I find myself wondering often what he was intending by giving that sort of messianic imagery to Nynaeve. So anyway, yeah, those are my personal unfired Chekov's guns, or unfulfilled setups. Wish I could have thought of another metaphor while I was doing this, but I don't know what to call them. As I said, again, at the beginning of this video, an author is fully allowed to change their minds about something and leave things to our imaginations. So obviously, this is just my subjective experience with these particular things, but what do you think? Are there any things in the books, any setups that you feel didn't go anywhere, or where they went didn't feel worthy of a setup, in your opinion? Let me know in the comments below. And if you like my content and you want to support me, I have a Patreon, which is linked in the description below. As I say every single time, I am so grateful to my patrons. Your support means so much to me. You really make this all possible, so thank you so very much. And with that, I am going to end this here. So please like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye!